I'm moving in with someone else. They're pregnant with my child. Half of your new $1 million penthouse should cover my losses. That sentence did not fall. It detonated. Glass chimed. A fork clinked against china. Someone laughed the way people laugh when they smell a fire and pretend it is the oven. I kept both hands on the folder. The folder mattered. Inside were fresh copies of my mortgage, the condo bylaws, and a list of wire confirmations that represented 10 patient years of savings numbers written in careful ink like prayers. The room was all candlelight and curated flowers, and the kind of skyline that makes people take photos instead of listening. It was my birthday, my housewarming, and my first evening inside the place. I had closed on at noon a penthouse with tall windows and a terrace that catches the river breeze paid for with a down payment. I built slowly like stacking. Pebbles. I am Evelyn, 32. I manage money for other people and most days understand risk. Tonight I watched Risk wear a tuxedo and grin at my friends. Jordan raised a flute and smiled big, the way fitness trainers smile for billboard shoots. There was a smear of cake at the corner of that smile. We should all be adults here, Jordan said, theatrically calm. New beginnings and all that. Someone near the charcuterie board whispered, "Is this performance art?" A cousin from Boston angled her phone for a better angle. Behind her, the skyline kept glittering like nothing had changed. I set the folder on the marble island, felt the cool stone through the paper. I heard myself say one word that did not feel like mine. Congratulations. It left my mouth as flat as a receipt. Jordan blinked. That's it. Then the smile twisted. You always said love is logistics. Consider the logistics: prenatal care, a nursery, moving costs. Half your place solves a lot. There was a soft wave of pitying chuckles, the kind people give a dog wearing shoes. I saw my mother's lips flatten. She is a church lady kind of woman, allergic to spectacle. My boss mouthed an apology from across the room, as if this catastrophe had been scheduled without consulting him. I inhaled. It tasted like lemon frosting and bright wine. What I remember next are objects. The silver key to the storage cage glinting in the bowl. The envelope for the ring appraisal on the counter still unsealed. The little notary stamp the closing attorney gave me as a joke. In moments like this, you choose between arguments and actions. I have always been an action person. Jordan was still addressing the crowd like a motivational speaker who had wandered into the wrong ballroom. We can make this civil, Jordan continued, if Evelyn stops being dramatic. There was a smear of smugness on the word civil. The playlist changed tracks. Someone had put on a 70s love song by accident. The universe can be very funny. I took my phone. My thumb knew the steps better than my head did. Freeze the authorized user card. Remove the guest profile from the security app. Swap the main door code to a new phrase only I would remember. I touched the envelope with the ring appraisal and slipped it back into the folder. In the reflection of the oven door, I saw my face. It looked like someone else's calm. Evelyn, Jordan said, lowering the glass, "Don't act crazy. We can talk numbers." Numbers. I almost laughed. My life is full of numbers. 10 years of saving. $1.2 million list price. 20% down. 30 years if I let it be 30. Or less if I stay stubborn. I had promised myself I would be stubborn. Someone tapped a spoon and begged for a toast to ease the tension. To friendship, they said too brightly. I did not raise my glass. I was busy tightening the knot of my own dignity. The humiliation slid over me like cold water. Not because Jordan chose someone else. People choose what they want, and sometimes they want noisy. The humiliation was in the theater of it: my night, my terrace, my wine, my life, arranged like a showroom while a guest announced a baby, as if it were a hostile takeover. I folded the ring finger into my palm and felt the soft dent where jewelry had rested. What they did not know, what I did not yet say, was that I had been moving pieces quietly for weeks. There were emails. Late-night messages. I had saved the ones where Jordan asked for bridge funds to cover a credit card minimum because clients were slow this month. There was a receipt for a personal training certification renewal that I had paid because I believed in building people even when they arrive unfinished. I slid the folder into the cabinet beneath the sink and closed the door more gently than necessary. I turned back to the room. I could have told everyone about the messages. I could have opened a gallery of screenshots across the oversized television, like a PowerPoint titled, "How to Lose a Fiancé in 10 Easy Payments." Instead, I found my voice. "You made a choice," I said to Jordan, "and I respect choices. Mine begins now." That is how I ended the party without raising my voice. The playlist faded, the candles sputtered, the terrace door sighed shut. Friends who matter squeezed my shoulder and left without advice. Strangers who had come for skyline photos lingered, then drifted toward elevators. My mother kissed my cheek and whispered, "You are allowed to close a door." She has never sounded more like a mother. I stood alone in a room that still smelled like sugar. On the island, a single-place card with my name lay face down beside a butter knife. The skyline finally stopped showing off. I rinsed the knife, watched water flash silver under the tap. Then I dried my hands and changed the coat again just because. I do not cry easily, not because I am hard, but because my tears arrive late like trains from small towns. What I felt first was not sorrow. It was a quiet, metallic clarity. People can betray you. Systems should not. Mortgage servicers should answer calls. Locks should obey. Credit bureaus should record the truth. These are the adult prayers of a person who handles money for a living and knows how quickly a future can tilt. My phone buzzed. A notification someone had tagged me in a story. Jordan on a different rooftop arm around someone in a pale dress captioned with something about fate and new chapters. The camera angle flattered nobody. The comments had already begun their electric work, half congratulations, half rubbernecking. I muted the account and felt nothing at all. Here is the part that matters. Tell me where you are watching from and hit subscribe. We are about to talk plainly about families and money, about humiliation that arrives wearing cologne, about betrayal dressed as a speech. I will explain what happened at the door 6 hours later, why the camera in my foyer caught a tuxedo slumped on the floor like a discarded costume, and how an entire building watched a redemption arc fail to launch. But first, I will make tea. I will wash the 2 champagne flutes that never got used. I will slide the ring appraisal into a safe, and the safe into a closet, and the closet into the kind of silence that heals. And I will tell you how I learned that love without paperwork is theater, and theater without truth is just noise. I will tell you that part in a moment. I still remember the night as if the plates and silverware are frozen in my mind. It was my sister's engagement dinner, a place where families were supposed to celebrate beginnings. Instead, it became the evening my own blood chose to erase me. The restaurant was expensive, the kind with velvet chairs and chandeliers reflecting candlelight. My parents had reserved the largest private room. The bill for one night would rival a month's worth of my mortgage payments. I walked in carrying a modest gift, an envelope with a handwritten card, and a check to help them start their new life. I thought it was kind, even generous. But the first words I heard cut sharper than any knife. "You do not belong at this table. This celebration is for successful people." My sister's voice coated with laughter, yet dripping with venom. She pointed at a small table near the corner close to the trash bins where waiters dumped empty glasses. The entire room erupted in laughter, even my parents chuckling as if humiliating me was a toast. I froze, gripping the envelope in my hand. My name was written neatly on the front, but at that moment it felt like a useless scrap of paper. I sat at the corner table because what else was I supposed to do? The clinking of champagne glasses carried across the room while I stared at a lonely breadbasket in front of me. Every sound, the scraping of forks, the whispers of relatives, was an echo of exclusion. The waiter asked quietly, "Would you like to order, sir?" "No," I whispered, "I will wait." That was the first sting, solitude disguised as family celebration. The second sting came with the bill. The total was read aloud, $2,800. My sister lifted her glass, smiling cruelly. "Well," she said, "let the successful ones handle it." My parents nodded, sliding the bill toward me, as if this humiliation was natural law. Their daughter's wedding, my sister's victory lap, and somehow I was expected to fund the entire spectacle. I leaned back my hand on the envelope. My heart pounded not with fear, but with something heavier clarity. I placed the envelope flat on the table, slid it across the linen cloth toward my sister, and said in a calm voice, "If wealth defines family, then let wealth pay for tonight. My gift was enough, but you threw me away with it." Silence followed. The laughter dried up, like spilled wine soaking into a carpet. No one knew what to say. That was the night I learned, bloodlines can be sharper than blades. But what they did not know was this. I had been building my own strength in quiet rooms, far from their judgment, and one day the tables would turn. Because betrayal has a way of fermenting into resolve. I will tell you that part soon. But first, let me ask, where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments and subscribe, because what comes next will make you question how families treat one another when money is involved. I used to believe betrayal arrived like a thief in the night, quiet and hidden. But mine came in broad daylight, dressed in silk, with a smile painted across familiar lips. After the humiliation at the engagement dinner, I promised myself I would not let them cut me open again. Yet betrayal has a way of seeking you out, especially when it smells your loyalty as weakness. It was a week later when the phone rang. My sister's fiancé, a man I barely knew, called me. His voice was slick, practiced the kind of tone people use when selling a car that has already broken down twice. "We're in a bit of a bind," he said, as if we shared a ledger. "The deposit for the new house is due. You know how it is, banks are slow, lenders are cruel. We thought, you being family, you could wire us something. A bridge loan just until the wedding gifts clear." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles whitened. The irony was bitter. The same people who had exiled me to a corner table now wanted my savings to fund their dream. They had mocked me, then asked me to build their foundation brick by brick. My silence must have unsettled him. "It is not charity," he added quickly. "Think of it as an investment in family." I laughed, a sharp sound that startled even me. "Investment? You declared me worthless last week. What return do you offer now?" He muttered something about gratitude and future holidays together. I hung up before he could finish. Betrayal was not in the request itself, it was in the memory that my sister and parents had rehearsed that line at the dinner table. "This celebration is for successful people." They had declared me unworthy, yet still counted on me to fund their success. That night I opened the small fireproof box where I kept documents. The deed to my modest condo, the appraisal for the engagement ring I had once thought of buying for myself as a mark of independence, and the stack of bank statements showing the quiet discipline of years, every overtime check deposited, every indulgence skipped. Those pages were my story. They held more truth than any toast. And yet betrayal does not only come from family, it also comes from the shadows of your own generosity. The next morning, a group chat notification buzzed. A screenshot appeared, my sister and her fiancé mocking me. "ATM with shoes," the message read, followed by a string of laughing emojis. I recognized her style of cruelty, light, casual, as if erasing me were a party game. The image spread quickly among cousins, then friends of cousins, until I could feel the smirks following me down the street. I stared at the message until the letters blurred. For a moment, I wanted to call her, to scream, to demand respect. But instead, I did something quieter. I saved the screenshot into a locked folder. Evidence has its own patience. Later that week, my parents visited. My mother sat stiffly, her handbag clutched in her lap. My father cleared his throat. "You should help them," he said. "They are starting a family. It is what decent people do." I looked at the clock on the wall, then back at them. "Did you call me decent last week? When you laughed at me sitting alone by the trash bins?" They shifted uncomfortably. My mother muttered, "We did not mean it that way." But betrayal is not erased by soft voices. It settles in the body, heavy as lead. I walked them to the door, kissed their cheeks out of habit, and locked it behind them. Then I leaned against the wood and whispered to the silence, "You cannot buy me twice." What they did not know was that my resolve had sharpened. Every insult, every screenshot, every careless demand, they were bricks, and I was building something out of them. Not a wall, not yet. Something stronger. Because revenge, like savings, grows when you let it rest quietly. And soon they would learn what it meant when someone like me finally decided not to pay the bill. But that part I will tell you in the next chapter. Betrayal lingers like a stain. You think it fades, but then the light shifts, and there it is again, darker than before. I thought the engagement dinner and the mocking messages were enough lessons for a lifetime, but the climax came one night when I heard the knock on my door, loud, desperate, echoing down the hallway of my building like a summons. It was almost midnight. I had just finished balancing my accounts, the ritual that always brought me calm. Numbers do not lie. They are not swayed by charm or cruelty. I was rinsing a glass when the pounding began. I walked to the door, the camera feed already glowing on my phone. There stood Jordan, the tuxedo from the birthday party, now wrinkled, his hair damp as if he had been running. The smug trainer, the man who had announced his betrayal over champagne, was crouched against my doorframe. "Evelyn," he muttered loud enough for the hallway microphone to catch, "please. Let me in." Neighbors' doors cracked open. Phones appeared in hands like torches. One tenant across the hall whispered to another, "Is this happening?" Another raised her phone, live stream already rolling. Within minutes, strangers on the internet were watching him plead, tuxedo sagging, tie loose, eyes swollen. The caption on the viral clip read, "From luxury fiancé to crying ex in less than 24 hours. By morning, it had 1 million views." Through the lens, I studied him. He had always been proud of his posture, the broad shoulders, the fitness magazine grin. Now his shoulders collapsed inward. His grin had vanished. He was smaller than I remembered, as if humiliation had shaved him down. "I made a mistake," he said, pounding once more. "She threw me out. I do not have anywhere to go." The irony was bitter enough to taste. He had thrown me out of my own party with words designed to gut me, and now he begged for shelter in full view of the same neighbors who had toasted our engagement months earlier. I held my phone steady. One button would open the lock, grant him access to warmth, to forgiveness, to a second chance. Another button, simpler, would seal him out. The live stream comments rolled in faster than I could read. "Do not open. Let him stay in the hall. Revenge looks good on you, Evelyn." I said nothing. My silence became part of the show. He pressed his forehead against the door. "Evelyn, I will pay you back. I will sign whatever you want, just please do not leave me here." There it was, the slip. He thought this was still a negotiation, a transaction in which I was the banker and he was the client begging for credit. I thought of the prenup draft that still lay in my folder unsigned, the document I had once begged him to review, the paper he had waved off with a laugh. "We do not need lawyers," he had said, "then we need love." Now his voice cracked as he offered signatures like currency. I lifted the phone, aimed the lens at his face. For a moment, our eyes met through glass and pixels. Then, with the same calm I had felt at the party, I tapped the button that set the locks into full shutdown. The sound of bolts sliding echoed in the hall, a mechanical refusal. Gasps. Laughter. Cheers. The neighbors closed their doors one by one, satisfied with the ending of the episode. Jordan slumped fully to the floor. I walked back to the kitchen, poured the water from my glass down the sink, and let the silence fill the room. Outside, the comments multiplied, the clip spread, and a story I had not chosen to tell became public property. That night, I did not sleep. Not because of regret, but because of clarity. Betrayal had humiliated me, but humiliation had also freed me. I realized I had the power to write the next act. What they did not know was that I had kept every email, every late-night message, every request for money, disguised as romance. Evidence was patient. Evidence did not rot. And soon evidence would speak louder than any toast, louder than any live stream. But that I will explain in the next chapter. Morning arrived heavy, not because of sleep, but because of noise. My phone buzzed as if the whole city had discovered my hallway. When I opened the screen there, it was Jordan's tuxedoed body slumped outside my door, replayed in clip after clip, millions of views layered with endless commentary. Trainer dumps fiancé for baby mama, gets evicted in hours. That headline ran across an online tabloid before breakfast. By noon, it was everywhere. The image was impossible to escape, his forehead pressed to the wood, his hand trembling against the frame, my silence a shield between us. Some saw me as cold, others saw me as the justice they wished they had delivered in their own lives. Either way, the narrative had escaped us both. Jordan's gym sponsors moved quickly. By evening, they issued a statement. "We do not condone personal conduct that undermines our values." In plain words, they cut him loose. A contract once worth tens of thousands of dollars vanished with a press release. I imagined the look on his face when he read it, that same grinless expression I had seen through the camera, only now magnified by consequence. He had built his brand on strength, yet the internet revealed him as fragile. And then came the live stream. Perhaps he thought he could flip the story. Perhaps he believed people still wanted his voice. That night, he set up a cheap ring light in some borrowed apartment, went live to defend himself. "This has all been blown out of proportion," he insisted, his tone half angry, half pleading. "Evelyn knows me. She knows I am not that man." But the comments did not listen. They drowned him in sarcasm, spamming phrases like ATM fiancé and from luxury to lobby in one night. Thousands of laughing faces rolled across the screen, a digital mob reminding him of the humiliation he had once staged for me. I watched quietly, not as a victim, but as a witness. Revenge does not always require action. Sometimes it only requires patience, while arrogance destroys itself. The next morning, another blow landed. A leaked email surfaced, an internal note from the gym's management blacklisting Jordan from future industry contracts. It spread like wildfire. Employers saw him not as a coach, but as a liability. I poured coffee, read the email twice, and tucked it into my growing folder of evidence. Each page, each screenshot, each headline was another brick. And together they built a wall between who I had been humiliated, dismissed, and who I was becoming. But here is what the world did not see. My resolve was not only about punishing Jordan, it was about reclaiming myself. The calm I felt was not cruelty, it was survival. They had mocked me in a room full of family, stripped me of dignity with a joke about success, then begged me to finance their dream. Now the ledger was balancing not by my hand, but by truth revealed. And yet this was not the end. No, the reckoning had only begun. Because what I had in my folder was heavier than gossip, stronger than headlines. It was proof, and proof, when revealed at the right moment, can burn brighter than any scandal. I will tell you that part soon. Some reckonings happen in courtrooms. Mine began in a quiet office overlooking the river. My attorney, a woman whose calm could freeze boiling water, spread the papers across her desk. Emails begging for bridge funds, screenshots of private messages where Jordan called me his personal bank, an invoice forged in my name, promising a non-existent investment, evidence page after page signed by his own carelessness. She tapped the stack. Financial fraud, she said almost gently. Misrepresentation, too. If we press charges, sponsors will run before trial. I nodded. Revenge is a loud word, but its engine is patience. For weeks I had cataloged everything, labeling folders like a meticulous librarian. Not out of malice, out of self-defense. People who weaponize love expect their targets to forget details. I remembered every one. That afternoon we drafted 3 letters. The first went to the professional board that issues personal trainer licenses. The second to the gym chain prepared to rebrand him as their star. The third to his new fiancée, the woman who had posed in that rooftop photo. Each letter contained the same attachments. Proof of lies told, money taken, promises broken. Facts travel farther than anger. By evening, the responses began. The board thanked me for upholding industry integrity and opened a formal inquiry. The gym's legal department replied in one curt sentence: contract, terminated effective immediately. I imagined the email landing in Jordan's inbox like cold water on a smoldering ember. But the deepest cut came from his new fiancée. She posted a short video, her face blotchy but resolute. He lied about everything she said, voice trembling. There is no nursery, no baby, only debts in my name. Views skyrocketed. Sympathy poured toward her. Scorn flowed toward him. The internet can pivot faster than any jury. Jordan tried to answer with another live stream, but the platform muted him for harassment when he cursed at viewers. He fell silent, a man stranded on an island of his own making. Meanwhile, my lawyer filed a civil claim for the money he had siphoned during our relationship. Not extravagant amounts, just every disguised loan, every sneaky subscription, every down payment he had sweet-talked out of me. The total came to $27,680, spelled out in clean legal ink. Enough to remind him that choices carry invoices. When the summons reached his bare apartment, he had moved twice in 2 months, each place smaller than the last he called me, from a number I did not recognize. I let it ring 4 times, then answered. Silence on his end except for breathing. Finally he said, "You are destroying me." "I am documenting you," I replied. "The difference matters." He begged, then threatened, then sobbed. The 3 stages of a man discovering accountability. I listened until the sobs turned to static, then ended the call and blocked the number. Closure sometimes sounds like a click. News outlets picked up the story, a cautionary tale about ego money and public downfall. Talk radio hosts debated whether my actions were heroic or vengeful. I did not join the debate. Revenge is not a public performance. It is a private settling of accounts. During those weeks, I slept better than I had in years. Not because he suffered his pain was his own, but because my boundaries held. Every night, I locked the folder in my safe-brewed chamomile tea and watched the skyline without dread. Freedom tastes like quiet. Yet vengeance is never the final chapter. It is only the door that leads to something gentler. I began to imagine life beyond the penthouse, a place untainted by that birthday night. I pictured a small house with a garden mornings filled with birds instead of elevators. But before I could move forward, one task remained: a dinner with my parents. They had stayed silent through the scandal, perhaps ashamed, perhaps stubborn. I invited them to the penthouse for coffee. They arrived, tense eyes on the floor. My mother spoke first. "We misjudged you," she whispered. "We followed the loudest voice in the room." I set 2 mugs on the table. "You followed cruelty because it entertained you. I followed numbers because they never laugh at the wrong joke." Tears slipped down her cheek. My father bowed his head. They asked for forgiveness, not with grand speeches, but with the hush of people who have learned how much humiliation costs. I did not rush to absolve them yet. I felt the hardness in my chest soften. Revenge had never been about punishing them. It had been about teaching myself I deserved better. Now they saw the lesson too. We talked until dusk, not about money, but about childhood memories, little kindnesses almost forgotten. When they left, my mother pressed a folded note into my palm, a promise to repay every cent of the engagement dinner. I have not decided whether to cash it. Sometimes the gesture is worth more than the funds. That night I opened the terrace doors, breathed the river air, and understood that vengeance is a season, not a climate. Winter was ending. In the next chapter, I will tell you how I sold the penthouse, bought the cottage, and found peace in rooms where my name was never a punchline. The ledger is balanced. Now comes the harvest. Spring crept into the city like a shy guest, and with it came the notion that I no longer belonged among glass towers. The penthouse had served its purpose. It was a fortress when I needed walls, but every fortress is also a cage. So I called my realtor a patient man who knew how to read both markets and moods. We listed the unit at a figure I could hardly wrap my tongue around: $1.4 million. The number stood there in the brochure like a mountain I had climbed without noticing. Within 10 days, 3 offers arrived, each higher than the last. I chose the buyer who wrote a letter describing how she dreamed of morning light on the East Terrace. People who cherish light will rarely squander space. When the contract was signed, I walked through every room one last time. I touched the cold marble of the kitchen island, the place where Jordan's announcement still echoed if I listened too hard. I ran a finger along the picture window, then pressed my palm to the spot on the oak floor where the folder once rested. These objects had witnessed both betrayal and resilience. They deserved a quiet farewell. The closing yielded a sum that felt mythical. After paying off the mortgage and taxes, I held a cashier's check for $862,000. I read the amount twice, pronouncing each digit in my head as though it were a prayer. Money is not virtue, but it is oxygen. With enough of it, you can breathe anywhere. I left the city a month later, driving north, until the skyline dissolved into rolling hills. My destination was a modest cedar cottage on 3 acres near a slow river, a place where frogs outsing traffic and nights smell of pine. The price was comfortable, the taxes gentle, and the mortgage small enough that it felt like a kindly handshake rather than a chain. The first evening there, I sat on the porch with a mug of tea, listening to crickets practice their endless hymn. No doorman, no elevator chime, no neighbors scrolling, spite on their phones, just space for thoughts to land softly. I caught myself smiling at the ridiculous luxury of stillness. Yet stories do not end simply because the venue changes. One afternoon, an envelope arrived from a law firm representing Jordan. Inside was a single-page apology, notarized admitting liability for the debt he had incurred in my name and consenting to the civil judgment. No theatrics, no pleas. A legal bow. I scanned the paper, filed it, and felt nothing but a mild breeze of closure. News of my move spread quietly among family. At first, my parents worried I was retreating too far, but when they visited, they understood. My mother walked barefoot on the grass, marveling at daisies pushing through the soil. My father inspected the tool shed, already planning repairs I had not requested. We shared a meal of simple food: bread, garden salad, a roast chicken, and spoke like people discovering one another after a storm. I did not mention the engagement dinner. They did not mention success. Sometimes mercy is silence. A week later, I hosted a small gathering for friends who had stood beside me in darker hours. The cottage's wooden table scarred with history, filled with dishes. Each guest carried in stews, pies, a jug of elderflower cordial. When twilight bent the sky into lavender, I lifted a glass of water, plain, clear, honest. To choosing ourselves, I said, voice steady, and to learning that love without respect is debt, but respect without love is interest. We deserve better than either. They raised their glasses. No cameras, no applause, only the clink of glass on glass and the soft chorus of night insects. The toast felt lighter than champagne and more nourishing. Later, alone on the porch, I opened my journal and wrote, Peace is not a destination. It is a series of small, consistent choices. I closed the book, letting ink dry under starlight. Somewhere beyond the hills, a train sounded its lonely horn. I listened until the echo faded, then went inside, locking the door, not out of fear, but out of habit. Jordan, I heard, was living in a rented room across town, working sporadically at smaller gyms. His social accounts were silent. The world had moved on, as it always does. I harbored no hunger for further updates. Indifference is a sweeter victory than gloating. As for me, dawn now begins with birds tapping the gutter and ends with the hum of a single lamp while I read. I planted lavender by the walkway tomato seedlings in raised beds and a maple sapling that will outlive every headline about that hallway video. Watching things grow is the purest rebuttal to those who tried to stunt me. The ledger of my life balances differently these days. Less about assets, more about hours spent kindly. I still manage portfolios for clients over a secure connection, but I log off before sunset. The river path waits, and the sky turns apricot over the tree line, and I remember that success is not a table where some sit and others serve. It is a garden where everyone who tends may harvest. If you have followed me this far, thank you. In the final chapter, I will share the last loose threads, how I turned evidence into a scholarship fund, how my family learned to laugh without cruelty, and the quiet surprise that arrived in my mailbox one blue morning. Stay with me. One more chapter, and we will close the book together. I woke one spring morning to find a pale blue envelope on my porch, the kind that looks hand-carried. Inside was a note from the licensing board. Jordan's credential had been permanently revoked. No fanfare, just a line of ink and an embossed seal. I folded the letter, slipped it into the back of my journal, and felt a quiet click inside my chest, the last latch sliding into place. That same week, I received the first payment from the civil judgment, a bank transfer for $2,000 in change. It surprised me. I had assumed Jordan would ignore the ruling. Instead, there it was, a digital receipt of accountability. I stared at the figure a moment, modest compared with what he owed, yet large enough to matter if aimed well. I opened the folder labeled Evidence Financial, scrolled through the documents, and chose 3 that best illustrated how easily trust turns to debt. Then I blacked out names and balances, leaving only lesson and context. With my attorney's blessing, I presented the anonymized packet to a nonprofit that teaches financial literacy in underfunded high schools. In exchange, I funded a small scholarship, $20,000, 20 separate awards of $1,000 each marked for a student who shows steadiness rather than brilliance. When the director asked what to call the fund, I said, "Name it for my grandmother, Rose. She balanced ledgers with a stub of pencil and never borrowed respect." The director smiled. The title suited the mission. Meanwhile, my family's wounds began to scar rather than bleed. My parents visited often, bringing groceries and unsolicited advice about pruning tomato vines. We did not dissect the past. Instead, we built new habits. My father fixed a loose porch rail without comment. My mother labeled freezer meals so I could take a night off, though she knew I already did. Once, as we watched fireflies, she touched my arm and whispered, "Humor should never cost dignity." It was not an apology yet. It landed deeper than regret. Even my sister reached out first, a cautious email, then a phone call. Her marriage had been postponed. The fiancé's family questioned the finances, the headlines, the hallways. She sounded tired, stripped of the champagne fizz. "I said things I cannot defend," she admitted. I listened, feeling the space between us wider than any highway, yet not impassable. Forgiveness, I have learned, is a garden that grows only when both planters kneel. I told her I needed time, and she said she would wait. Peace settled into the cottage, like dust caught in morning sunbeams. Days began with coffee on the steps, the mug warming my palms, birds arguing in the maple I had planted. Nights ended with the creak of old wood cooling and the rustle of river reeds. My work required fewer hours now. Curiosity investments often beat urgency. Clients stayed grateful for calm counsel delivered from a place that sounded like wind through pines. One Tuesday, the mail brought another surprise, a slim package wrapped in brown paper. Inside lay Jordan's silver cufflink, the one he had worn at my birthday, and a handwritten sentence, returning what never fit me. No demand, no plea. I held the metal between thumb and forefinger. It caught the light for the briefest shine, then dulled. I walked to the river's edge, opened my hand, and watched the cufflink arc into the water. The splash was barely audible, yet its echo cleared the last shadow from my mind. That evening I hosted a final dinner for friends and family, a mosaic of voices once separate. We used mismatched plates. We laughed without rehearsing. After dessert, I rose holding a glass of cool spring water. The room quieted like a tide pulling back. Some debts are paid in cash. I said others in lessons. I have settled both. If you ever doubt your worth, remember that silence can be louder than applause and boundaries kinder than loans. The porch light glowed amber as we said goodnight. I gathered empty glasses, washed them under warm water, and felt the steady rhythm of a life restored. In the dark window, I saw my reflection, not a victim, not a victor, simply a woman standing where she chose. Before I slept, I posted one last message to the audience that had followed every chapter. If you think I made the right choice, comment right. If you see a better path, share your idea below. Someone reading may need it. And wherever you are, choose respect first, because money can buy furniture, but it cannot furnish love. I set the phone face down, breathed in lavender from the planter box, and let the night fold over me like a soft quilt. The story is told, the ledger is closed, and the garden my garden grows.